For years, my salary was the only thing keeping my family alive, paying for every single luxury they took for granted. But the moment I refused to hand over my $4,000 wedding savings to fund my sister's vacation to Hawaii, my mother threw my clothes into a trash bag and kicked me out of the house. They stood there laughing, thinking they had left me with nothing, completely blind to the chilling reality that they hadn't just kicked out a daughter. They had just locked out the only human being holding the master keys to their survival, and the silent trap I left behind was about to erase their entire existence in a way they never saw coming. Before I begin my story, I have a quick question for you. I'd love to know where you are watching this from right now and what time it is over there. It honestly brings me so much joy to see how far our global family reaches. Let me know in the comments. My name is Harper. If you met me 2 years ago, you would have probably called me a pushover. The quiet girl who always smiled, nodded, and carried the weight of the world on her shoulders without a single complaint. At 26, I was working as a senior corporate accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Boston. My days started before the sun came up, freezing on the train platform, and usually ended long after the cleaning crew arrived to empty the trash bins at my office. I was pulling 60-hour weeks, buried under spreadsheets, tax codes, and corporate audits. But I didn't mind the grind. In fact, I welcomed it because I believed I was doing it for the people I loved most. I was raised with a very specific traditional mindset. Family is everything. Blood means unconditional protection. And when the people who gave you life are struggling, you don't ask questions, you just step up and fix it. My compliance wasn't just a personality trait, it was my religion. Because of that deep-seated conditioning, I was fiercely loyal, fiercely quiet, and completely blind to the reality of my own existence. I genuinely thought my constant sacrifices were keeping my family afloat during a tough financial season. I thought that by burning myself out every day, I was proving my love, proving my worth, and earning my place at our dinner table. What I didn't see, or what I desperately chose to ignore, was that I was actually just drowning myself to keep a group of emotional parasites dry. I had become completely invisible as a human being. Nobody asked how my day was, nobody noticed the dark circles permanently carved under my eyes, and nobody cared that I was wearing the same worn-out coat for 3 winters straight. My value in that suburban house was entirely tied to my bank account. The moment I walked through the front door every evening, my mother wouldn't look up from her iPad to greet me. She would simply point at a stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter and say, "Harper, the electric bill is overdue." Or, "Harper, we need more groceries." I had been systematically stripped of my identity as a daughter and a sister. I didn't have a voice. I had a routing number. I was an interest-free ATM with an unlimited withdrawal limit, and my family had grown incredibly comfortable spending currency they never had to sweat for. I was living with 3 adults who viewed my hard work not as a blessing, but as a basic entitlement. I kept telling myself that things would change, that once we got through the winter, or once my father found his footing, or once my sister grew up, they would finally see me. They would finally appreciate the girl who held the roof over their heads. But appreciation never comes to an asset. It only comes to a person. And to Robert, Susan, and Maya, I was just a walking, breathing financial life support machine that they assumed would run forever. For 4 long, grueling years, I was the invisible pillar holding our entire household together. The dynamic in our home wasn't just unbalanced, it was parasitic. My father, Robert, had completely checked out of reality years ago. After a corporate layoff back when I was a junior in college, he just gave up. He refused to look for work, claiming the job market was rigged against men of his age and experience. He spent his days sitting in his recliner, watching cable news, and complaining about the economy while actively refusing to contribute a single dime to it. My mother, Susan, wasn't any better. She didn't work either, but she managed our household like a supreme tyrant, barking orders from her tablet and curating a lifestyle on Facebook that we simply could not afford. Then, there was my 23-year-old sister, Maya. Maya was the undisputed golden child of the family. She could do absolutely no wrong in my parents' eyes. She was a college dropout who had convinced my parents that a traditional path was too restrictive for her creative soul. Maya spent her days sleeping in until noon, ordering expensive iced coffees on food delivery apps, and spending her nights cultivating a completely fake, luxurious lifestyle for her social media followers. If you looked at her Instagram profile, you would think she was a wealthy influencer living a jet-setting life. What her followers didn't see was me, sitting in my small bedroom, paying the credit card bills that funded every single one of those outfits, aesthetic brunches, and high-end makeup hauls. Every single major and minor expense fell squarely on my shoulders. The heavy monthly mortgage on our four-bedroom suburban home, a home that was far too large for us, was linked directly to my checking account via autopay. When the property taxes spiked, I swallowed the panic, picked up extra consulting work on the weekends, and paid it. When the winter utility bills soared because Susan insisted on keeping the thermostat at a tropical 75 degrees while the Boston blizzard raged outside, my card covered it. High-speed fiber internet, water, trash collection, streaming subscriptions, everything was tied to my name. I even paid for the premium organic groceries that Maya insisted on, despite the fact that I survived on instant noodles and cafeteria leftovers at my office just to save a few bucks. The hypocrisy in that house was suffocating. I drove a modest, heavily dented sedan with over 15,000 mi on the odometer. The brakes squealed, the heater barely worked, and I was terrified it would break down on my commute every single day. Meanwhile, my family used my primary vehicle, a much newer, reliable SUV that I was still actively paying off for their daily outings, shopping sprees, and lunch dates. They would literally leave my car on empty, expecting me to fill the tank before my early morning shift. The emotional disparity was what hurt the most. I remember the day I earned a massive promotion at my firm. I had beaten out 3 external candidates, worked 80 hours the week prior, and secured a 15% raise. I came home practically glowing, holding a bottle of cheap sparkling cider to celebrate. I walked into the living room and announced the news. Susan didn't even look up from her iPad. Robert just grunted and asked if the raise meant I could finally pay for a contractor to fix the deck. Maya didn't even take her headphones out. But the very next morning, before I could even pour my coffee, Susan handed me a $500 receipt from a premium hair salon. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Maya needs to look her best for a brand collaboration this weekend. Since you got that raise, you can take care of this." I stood there holding the receipt, feeling the last remaining piece of my dignity wither away. I wasn't a daughter or a sister to them. I was just a corporate asset to be strip-mined. The breaking point arrived on a freezing Sunday evening in the middle of January. For 5 long years, while working myself to the bone, I had quietly starved my own social life, skipped vacations, and cut every personal corner possible to build a secret high-yield savings account. It was the only part of my life they couldn't see or touch. Through sheer discipline, I had managed to accumulate exactly $4,000. That money wasn't just a number to me. It was my lifeline. It was explicitly set aside for my future, for my wedding one day, and a down payment on a small place of my own where I could finally breathe without carrying the weight of 3 grown adults. I was sitting on my bed reviewing my budget on my laptop when my bedroom door swung open without a knock. Susan and Maya marched in. Maya had a smug, expectant look on her face, while my mother held her phone out like a weapon. Susan didn't drop her voice. She didn't ask how I was doing, and she certainly didn't look ashamed when she delivered her ultimatum. She told me that Maya's friends from college were planning a 2-week luxury getaway to a private 5-star resort in Hawaii. Maya had already promised them she was going, but her credit cards were maxed out. "We know you have that separate savings account, Harper," Susan said, her tone completely casual, as if she were asking to borrow a cup of sugar. "Maya needs your $4,000 to cover her first-class flights, her designer shopping, and her share of the resort villa. You need to transfer it to her account tonight." I sat there on the edge of my mattress, staring at them in absolute paralyzing shock. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Maya, who was casually checking her fingernails, and then at my mother. "You want me to give Maya my entire life savings?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The money I've spent 5 years bleeding for? Just so she can go take photos on a beach in Hawaii with her friends?" Susan frowned, her expression instantly turning cold and defensive. "Don't be so dramatic, Harper. You have a stable job. You can always make more money. Your sister is young. She's an influencer, and this trip is crucial for her networking and her happiness. Your wedding is years away, if it even happens at all. Right now, your family needs you to step up." For the first time in my 26 years of life, a hot, uncontrollable wave of anger rushed through my veins. The quiet, compliant girl died in that exact second. I stood up, closed my laptop with a loud slam, and looked my mother dead in the eye. "No," I said, my voice cracking but firm. "Absolutely not. I am not giving Maya a single dime of my savings. I pay the mortgage, I pay the utilities, I buy the food, and I drive a broken car while she uses my SUV. I am done funding her fake life. If she wants to go to Hawaii, she can get a job and earn it herself." The house erupted into an absolute war zone. Maya let out a dramatic, piercing gasp and began fake crying, running out of the room to find reinforcements. Seconds later, my father, Robert, burst into my room, his face bright red, shouting at the top of his lungs. He called me a cold, selfish, ungrateful monster. He accused me of being jealous of my sister's youth, beauty, and social life. Susan stood right beside him, clapping her hands and screaming that I was a parasite living in their home, conveniently forgetting that my paycheck was the only reason the bank hadn't taken the roof from over their heads yet. Within 10 minutes, the verbal abuse escalated to physical eviction. Susan marched into my closet, dragged out a heavy black trash bag, and began violently ripping my clothes off their hangers, stuffing them inside. "If you're going to act like a selfish stranger in this house, then you can go live like one," she shrieked. Robert grabbed my arm, dragging me down the hallway toward the front door. I tried to grab my car keys from the hook by the kitchen, but Maya snatched them away, smirking through her fake tears. Robert shoved me out the front door, directly into the freezing, unforgiving Boston winter night. I stumbled onto the icy porch, clutching the single trash bag of clothes to my chest. The wind cut through my thin sweater like a knife. Robert looked at me one last time, completely devoid of any parental love, and said, "If you don't know how to share with your family, you don't deserve to sleep under our roof. Don't come back until you're ready to transfer that money." The heavy oak door slammed shut in my face, and I heard the deadbolt click into place. Through the frosted glass of the living room window, I could see the three of them standing together in the warmth, laughing, completely convinced they had broken me. I sat in the front seat of a cheap rideshare vehicle, my body shaking uncontrollably, watching the warmly lit windows of our suburban house recede into the distance. Tears ran down my face, freezing against my cheeks in the bitter night air. Every instinct drilled into me since childhood was screaming that I had messed up, that I should just go back, hand over the money, and beg for their forgiveness, just to have a warm bed to sleep in. The heavy, suffocating guilt I had carried for years wrapped tightly around my throat. But midway to a budget motel on the outskirts of the city, something inside my mind finally snapped. It like a circuit breaker tripping under too much voltage. The warmth of the car's heater hit my face, and the desperate weeping girl who always sought her parents' validation suddenly vanished. In her place, a freezing, absolute clarity took over. I looked at my reflection in the dark, fogged-up window of the car. I saw the dark circles under my eyes, the pale skin, the sheer exhaustion from years of carrying a burden that was never mine to bear. And then I replayed the look on my mother's face as she threw my clothes into a garbage bag and the smirk on Maya's lips as she hid my car keys. They didn't love me. They didn't even see me as a human being with feelings, goals, or a future. To them, I was just a corporate asset to be strip-mined until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. They loved my bank account, my steady salary, and my endless compliance. I realized that my kindness hadn't been a virtue. It had been an open invitation for their cruelty. By constantly saving them from their own bad decisions, I had enabled their laziness and fueled their arrogance. I wiped the remaining tears from my face with the back of my hand, taking a deep, shuddering breath. The sadness was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating determination. I didn't want an apology anymore. I didn't want them to realize my worth through my absence, and I certainly wasn't going to beg for their acceptance ever again. They wanted to treat me like an independent stranger? Fine. I would give them exactly what they asked for. I was going to show them the precise market value of their independence, and I would let them see what happens when the financial life support machine they took for granted is completely unplugged. By the time the rideshare pulled up to the dingy motel, I had already stopped bleeding. I was ready to build a wall they could never climb over. The next morning at exactly 9 o'clock a.m., My cold calculations began. I sat at a small plastic table in my budget motel room, my laptop open, surrounded by a lukewarm cup of coffee, and an absolute silence that felt incredibly liberating. I didn't call in sick to work. Instead, I used my analytical skills to map out a systematic legal shutdown of the life my family took for granted. My first stop was my banking app. I logged into the joint checking account that my mother, Susan, had authorized access to for emergency household management. I unlinked my primary direct deposit, ensuring my corporate salary would never touch that account again. Then, I transferred my entire $4,000 into a newly opened, unlinked high-yield wealth fund at an entirely different banking institution, secured with two-factor authentication that only my biometric data could unlock. Next came the structural dismantle. Because I handled all the finances, I had master access to every single recurring utility and service attached to the suburban house. One by one, I pulled the plug. I logged into the mortgage portal. The house was legally in Robert and Susan's names, but the monthly $3,200 electronic transfer came directly from my bank account via an auto-pay agreement. I clicked deactivate. I deleted my saved banking information from the portal entirely. Then, I went down the list of utilities. I canceled the high-speed fiber internet subscription that Maya used to stream her high-definition social media videos. I canceled the premium cable package that my father watched all day from his recliner. I canceled the automated accounts for gas, electricity, and water, removing my credit cards from the A2 Pay auto-pay systems. Let them see how comfortable that tropical 75 degrees indoor temperature felt when the bills actually required their own sweat to clear. I didn't stop there. I systematically canceled the automated organic grocery delivery subscriptions and the premium streaming accounts they used daily. The final heaviest blow was the health insurance. As a senior corporate accountant, my firm provided a top-tier premium health insurance package that covered me, and through an extended family rider that I paid out of pocket for, it covered Robert, Susan, and Maya. I opened my corporate portal, drafted a formal email to our human resources department, and requested the immediate removal of all dependents from my policy effective at the end of the billing cycle, citing a change in household status. It was costing me $450 a month out of my own pocket to keep them insured, and that charity was officially bankrupt. By lunchtime, I closed my laptop. I spent the afternoon touring a quiet, sunlit loft apartment on the opposite side of Boston, miles away from the toxicity of the suburbs. It had hardwood floors, large windows, and a security system that required a key fob for entry. I signed the lease on the spot, paid the security deposit with a smile, and moved my single trash bag of clothes inside that very evening. Finally, I opened my phone settings. I didn't block their numbers immediately. Instead, I set my device to Do Not Disturb for any contact not on my verified corporate directory, effectively leaving my family to scream into an empty, silent vault. They wanted to see what life was like without a selfish daughter. They were about to find out exactly how much a cold winter costs. It took exactly 90 days for their fragile, parasitic paradise to collapse into absolute, irreversible ruin. Without my corporate salary silently absorbing the shock of their lifestyle, the cold reality of the Boston housing market hit them like a freight train. By the second month, the mortgage slipped into default. Because they had no savings and no income, the utility companies cut the power, leaving them freezing in the dark. Susan attempted to spam my inbox with frantic emails progressing from furious caps lock demands to pathetic weeping voicemails begging me to come home and save them from the bank. Maya sent texts claiming they were literally starving, but I kept my heart steady, blocking every single new social media account and burner number they created to reach me. I knew that if I gave them even an inch, they would drag me right back into the dirt to cushion their own fall. The bank eventually foreclosed on the suburban property, and my SUV was repossessed right out of the driveway. Stripped of their unearned luxury, Robert and Susan were forced to pack up whatever they could carry and rent a cramped, run-down studio apartment in a gritty industrial district of the city. Maya's superficial social media life vanished overnight. She was forced to delete her accounts out of intense public humiliation, and she now works a grueling night shift job at a local gas station just to help them buy basic groceries. The golden child was finally learning the value of $1. Free from their emotional and financial weight, my life completely transformed. My career soared, and for the first time in my existence, I breathed clean, unburdened air. It was during this beautiful period of personal peace that I met Ethan, a senior project manager at my firm. Ethan was a grounded, deeply protective, and mature man who listened to the truth of my past without an ounce of judgment. Instead, he held my hand and told me he respected the sheer strength it took for me to walk away. We married in a small, breathtakingly simple ceremony by the coast, surrounded only by genuine friends who loved us for who we were, not what we could provide. Today, as I watch the sunset from our balcony with Ethan, holding a warm cup of coffee, I feel a deep, unshakable peace. I realize that the greatest justice in life isn't anger or screaming. It's simply having the courage to walk away and build a beautiful life that the people who hurt you can no longer touch. Looking back at everything, I realized that walking away from my family wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. You cannot keep pouring yourself into people who only see you as a resource to exploit, even if they share your blood. Today, I have a beautiful, peaceful life with Ethan, and my only regret is not standing up for myself sooner. But I want to know what you think. Do you think I did the right thing by cutting them off completely? Or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below, and if you learned something valuable from my story, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join us daily.